Chapter 13 of Planet of the Damned. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Planet of the Damned by Harry Harrison. Chapter 13. He wouldn't come in, sir. Just hammered on the door and said, "I'm here, tell Brandd." Good enough, Brion said, fitting his gun in the holster and sliding the extra clip into his pocket. I am going out now, and I should return before dawn. Get one of the wheeled stretchers down here from the hospital. I'll want it waiting when I get back. Outside, the street was darker than he remembered. Brion frowned, and his hand moved towards his gun. Someone had put all the nearby lights out of commission. There was just enough illumination from the stars to enable him to make out the dark bulk of a sand car. "Brion Brandd?" a voice spoke harshly from the car. "Get in." The motor roared as soon as he had closed the door. Without lights, the sand car churned a path through the city and out into the desert. Though the speed picked up, the driver still drove in the dark, feeling his way with a light touch on the controls. The ground rose, and when they reached the top of a mesa, he killed the engine. Neither the driver nor Brion had spoken a word since they left. A switch snapped, and the instrument lights came on. In their dim glow, Brion could just make out the other man's hawk-like profile. When he moved, Brion saw that his figure was cruelly shortened. Either accident or a mutated gene had warped his spine, hunching him forward in eternally bent supplication. Warped bodies were rare. His was the first Brion had ever seen. He wondered what series of events had kept him from medical attention all his life. This might explain the bitterness and pain in the man's voice. "Did the mighty brains on Njord bother to tell you that they have chopped another day off the deadline?" the man asked. "That the world is about to come to an end?" "Yes, I know," Brion said. "That's why I'm asking your group for help. Our time is running out too fast." The man didn't answer. He merely grunted and gave his full attention to the radar pings and glowing screen. The electronic senses reached out as he made a check on all the search frequencies to see if they were being followed. "Where are we going?" Brion asked. "Out into the desert." The driver made a vague wave of his hand. "Headquarters of the army. Since the whole thing will be blown up in another day, I guess I can tell you it's the only camp we have. All the cars, men, and weapons are based there. And he's the man in charge. Tomorrow it will be all gone, along with this cursed planet. What's your business with us?" "Shouldn't I be telling Hiss that?" "Suit yourself." Satisfied with the instrument search, the driver kicked the car to life again and churned on across the desert. "But we're a volunteer army and we have no secrets from each other. Just from the fools at home who are going to kill this world." There was a bitterness in his words that he made no attempt to conceal. "They've fought among themselves to put off a firm decision so long that now they are forced to commit murder. From what I had heard, I thought it was the other way around. They call your Njord army terrorists." "We are. Because we are an army and we're at war. The idealists at home only understood that when it was too late. If they had backed us in the beginning, we would have blown open every black castle on Dis, searched until we found those bombs, but that would have meant wanton destruction and death. They wouldn't consider that. Now they are going to kill everyone, destroy everything." He flicked on the panel lights just long enough to take a compass bearing, and Brion saw the tortured unhappiness in his twisted body. "It's not over yet," Brion said. "There is more than a day left. And I think I'm onto something that might stop the war, without any bombs being dropped. You're in charge of the Cultural Relationships Free Bread and Blanket Foundation, aren't you? What good can your bunch do when the shooting starts?" "None. But maybe we can put off the shooting. If you are trying to insult me, don't bother. My irritation quotient is very high." The driver merely grunted at this, slowing down as they ran through a field of broken rock. "What is it you want?" he asked. "We want to make a detailed examination of one of the magter. Alive or dead, it doesn't make any difference. You wouldn't happen to have one around?" "No," We fought with them often enough, but always on their home grounds. They keep all their casualties, and a good number of ours. What good will it do you anyway? A dead one won't tell you where the bombs or the jump space projector is. I don't see why I should explain that to you, unless you are in charge. You are Hiss, aren't you?" The driver gave an angry sound, and then was silent while he drove. Finally he asked, "What makes you think that?" "Call it a hunch. You don't act very much like a sandcar driver, for one thing. Of course your army may be all generals and no privates, but I doubt it. I also know that time is almost run out for all of us. This is a long ride, and it would be a complete waste of time if you just sat out in the desert and waited for me. By driving me yourself you could make your mind up before we arrived. Could have a decision ready as to whether you are going to help me or not. Are you?" "Yes, I'm Hiss, but you still haven't answered my question. What do you want the body for?" "We're going to cut it open and take a good long look. I don't think the magter are human. They are something living among men and disguised as men, but still not human." "Secret aliens?" Hiss exploded the words in a mixture of surprise and disgust. "Perhaps. The examination will tell us that." "You're either stupid or incompetent," Hiss said bitterly. "The heat of Dis has cooked your brains in your head. I'll be no part of this kind of absurd plan." "You must," Brion said, surprised at his own calmness. He could sense the other man's interest hidden behind his insulting manner. "I don't even have to give you my reasons. In another day this world ends, and you have no way to stop it. I just might have an idea that could work, and you can't afford to take any chances. Not if you are really sincere. Either you are a murderer, killing Disans for pleasure, or honestly you want to stop the war. Which is it?" "You'll have your body all right," Hiss grated, hurling the car viciously around a spire of rock. "Not that it will accomplish anything, but I can find no fault with killing another magter. We can fit your operation into our plans without any trouble. This is the last night and I have sent every one of my teams out on raids. We're breaking into as many magter towers as possible before dawn. There is a slim chance that we might uncover something. It's really just shooting in the dark, but it's all we can do for now. My own team is waiting and you can ride along with us. The others left earlier. We're going to hit a small tower on this side of the city. We raided it once before and captured a lot of small arms they had stored there. There is a good chance that they may have been stupid enough to store something there again. Sometimes the magter seem to suffer a complete lack of imagination." "You have no idea just how right you are," Brion told him. The sandcar slowed down now, as they approached a slab-sided mesa that rose vertically from the desert. They crunched across broken rocks, leaving no tracks. A light blinked on the dashboard, and Hiss stopped instantly and killed the engine. They climbed out, stretching and shivering in the cold desert night. It was dark, walking in the shadow of the cliff, and they had to feel their way along the path, through the tumbled boulders. A sudden blaze of light made Brion wince and shield his eyes. Near him, on the ground, was the humming shape of a cancellation projector, sending out a fan-shaped curtain of vibration that absorbed all the light rays falling upon it. This incredible blackness made a light-proof wall for the recessed hollow at the foot of the cliff. In the shelter, under the overhang of rock, were 3 open sandcars. They were large and armor-plated, warlike in their scarred gray paint. Men sprawled, talked, and polished their weapons. Everything stopped when Hiss and Brion appeared. "Load up," Hiss called out. "We're going to attack now, same plan I outlined earlier. Get Telt over here." In talking to his own men, some of the harshness was gone from his voice. The tall soldiers of Njord moved in ready obeyance of their commander. They loomed over his bent figure, most of them twice as tall as he. But there was no hesitation in jumping when he commanded. They were the body of the Njord striking force. He was the brains. A square-cut, compact man rolled up to Hiss and saluted with a leisurely flick of his hand. He was weighted and slung about with packs and electronic instruments. His pockets bulged with small tools and spare parts. "This is Telt," Hiss said to Brion. "He'll take care of you. Telt's my personal technical squad. He goes along on all my operations with his meters to test the interiors of the Disan forts. So far he's found no trace of a jump space generator, or excessive radioactivity that might indicate a bomb. Since he's useless, and you're useless, you both take care of each other. Use the car we came in." Telt's wide face split in a frog-like grin. His voice was hoarse and throaty. "Wait, just wait. Someday those needles gonna flicker and all our troubles be over. What you want me to do with the stranger?" "Supply him with a corpse, one of the magter," Hys said. "Take it wherever he wants and then report back here." Hys scowled at Telt. "Someday your needles will flicker. Poor fool, this is the last day." He turned away and waved the men into their sandcars. "He likes me," Telt said, attaching a final piece of equipment. "You can tell because he calls me names like that. He's a great man, Hys is, but they never found out until it was too late. Hand me that meter, will you?" Brion followed the technician out to the car and helped him load his equipment aboard. When the larger cars appeared out of the darkness, Telt swung around after them. They snaked forward in a single line through the rocks until they came to the desert of rolling sand dunes. Then they spread out in a line abreast and rushed towards their goal. Telt hummed to himself hoarsely as he drove. He broke off suddenly and looked at Brion. "What you want the dead Dis for?" "A theory," Brion answered sluggishly. He had been half napping in the chair, taking the opportunity for some rest before the attack. "I'm still looking for a way to avert the end." "You and Hys," Telt said with satisfaction. "Couple of idealists, trying to stop a war you didn't start. They would never listen to Hys. He told them in the beginning exactly what would happen, and he was right. They always thought his ideas were crooked, like him. Growing up alone in the hill camp, with his back too twisted and too old to be fixed when he finally did come out. Ideas twisted the same way, made himself an authority on war. Ha! War on Njord. That's like being an ice cube specialist in hell. But he knew all about it, though they never would let him use what he knew. Put Granddaddy Kraft in charge instead." "But Hys is in charge of an army now." "All volunteers. Too few of them and too little money. Too little and too damned late to do any good. I'll tell you, we did our best, but it could never be good enough. And for this we get called butchers." There was a catch in Telt's voice now, an undercurrent of emotion he couldn't suppress. "At home they think we like to kill, think we're insane. They can't understand we're doing the only thing that has to be done." He broke off as he quickly locked on the brakes and killed the engine. The line of sandcars had come to a stop. Ahead, just visible over the dunes, was the summit of a dark tower. "We walk from here," Telt said, standing and stretching. "We can take our time because the other boys go in first, soften things up. Then you and I head for the sub-cellar for a radiation check, and find you a handsome corpse." Walking at first, then crawling when the dunes no longer shielded them, they crept up on the Disan keep. Dark figures moved ahead of them, stopping only when they reached the crumbling black walls. They didn't use the ascending ramp, but made their way up the sheer outside face of the ramparts. "Line throwers," Telt whispered. "Anchor themselves when the missile hits. Have some kind of quick-setting goo. Then we go up the filament with a line-climbing motor. Hys invented them." "Is that the way you and I are going in?" Brion asked. "No, we get out of the climbing. I told you we hit this rock once before. I know the layout inside." He was moving while he talked, carefully pacing the distance around the base of the tower. "Should be right about here." High-pitched keening sliced the air, and the top of the magter building burst into flame. Automatic weapons hammered above them. Something fell silently through the night and hit heavily on the ground near them.
"Attack started!"
Telt shouted.
"We have to get through now while all the creepies are fighting it out on top!"
He pulled a plate-shaped object from one of his bags and slapped it hard against the wall. It hung there. He twisted the back of it, pulled something, and waved Brion to the ground.
"Shaped charge! Should blow straight in, but you never can tell!"
The ground jumped under them, and the ringing thud was a giant fist punching through the wall. A cloud of dust and smoke rolled clear, and they could see the dark opening in the rock. a tunnel driven into the wall by the directional force of the explosion. Telt shone a light through the hole at the crumbled chamber inside. Nothing to worry about from anybody who was leaning against this wall, but let's get in and out of this black beehive before the ones upstairs come down to investigate. Shattered rock was thick on the floor, and they skidded and tumbled over it. Telt pointed the way with his light, down a sharply angled ramp. Underground chambers in the rock. They always stir their stuff down there. A smoking black sphere arced out of the tunnel's mouth, hitting at their feet. Telt just gaped, but even as it hit the floor, Brion was jumping forward. He caught it with the side of his foot, kicking it back into the dark opening of the tunnel. Telt hit the ground next to him as the orange flame of an explosion burst below. Bits of shrapnel rattled from the ceiling and walls behind them. "Grenades!" Telt gasped. "They've only used them once before, can't have many. Gotta warn Hiss." He plugged a throat mic into the transmitter on his tack and spoke quickly into it. There was a stirring below, and Brion poured a rain of fire into the tunnel.
"They're catching it bad on top, too. We gotta pull out. Go first, and I'll cover you."
"I came for my Disan. I'm not leaving until I get one."
"You're crazy. You're dead if you stay."
Telt was scrambling back towards the crumbled entrance as he talked. His back was turned when Brion fired. The magter had appeared silently as the shadow of death. They charged without a sound, running with expressionless faces into the bullets. Two died at once, curling and folding. The third one fell at Brion's feet, shot, pierced, dying, but not yet dead. Leaving a crimson track, it hunched closer, lifting its knife to Brion. He didn't move. How many times must you murder a man? Or was it a man? His mind and body rebelled against the killing, and he was almost ready to accept death himself rather than kill again. Telt's bullets tore through the body, and it dropped with grim finality.
"There's your corpse, now get it out of here!"
Telt screeched. Between them, they worked the sodden weight of the dead magter through the hole, their exposed backs crawling with the expectation of instant death. No further attack came as they ran from the tower, other than a grenade that exploded too far behind them to do any harm. One of the armored sandcars circled the keep, headlights blazing, keeping up a steady fire from its heavy weapons. The attackers climbed into it as they beat a retreat. Telt and Brion dragged the Disan behind them, struggling through the loose sand toward the circling car. Telt glanced over his shoulder and broke into a shambling run.
"They're following us,"
he gasped.
"It's the first time they've ever chased us after a raid."
"They must know we have the body," Brion said.
"Leave it behind,"
Telt choked.
"Too heavy to carry, anyway."
"I'd rather leave you," Brion said sharply. "Let me have it." He pulled the corpse away from the unresisting Telt and heaved it across his own shoulders. "Now use your gun to cover us!" Telt threw a rain of slugs back toward the dark figure following them. The driver of the sandcar must have seen the flare of their fire, because the truck turned and started towards them. It braked in a choking cloud of dust, and ready hands reached to pull them up. Brion pushed the body in ahead of himself and scrambled after it. The truck engine throbbed, and they turned away into the blackness, away from the gutted tower. "You know, that was more like a kind of joke when I said I'd leave the corpse behind," Telt told Brion. "You didn't believe me, did you?" "Yes," Brion said, holding the dead weight of the magter against the truck's side. "I thought you meant it." "Ah," Telt protested. "You're as bad as Hiss. You take things too seriously." Brion suddenly realized that he was wet with blood, his clothing sodden. His stomach rose at the thought, and he clutched the edge of the sandcar. Killing like this was too personal. Talking abstractly about a body was one thing, but murdering a man, then lifting his dead flesh and feeling his blood warm upon you, is an entirely different matter. But the magter weren't human, he knew that. The thought was only mildly comforting. After they had reached the other waiting sandcars, the raiding party split up. "Each one goes in a different direction," Telt said, "so they can't track us to the base." He clipped a piece of paper next to the compass and kicked the motor into life. "We'll make a big U-turn in the desert and end up in Hovedstadt. I got the course here. Then I'll dump you and your friend and beat it back to our camp. You're still not burned at me for what I said, are you? Are you?" Brion didn't answer. He was staring fixedly out of the side window. "What's doing?" Telt asked. Brion pointed out at the rushing darkness. "Over there," he said, pointing to the growing light on the horizon. "Dawn," Telt said. "Lot of rain on your planet? Didn't you ever see the sun come up before?" "Not on the last day of a world." "Lock it up," Telt grumbled. "You give me the crawls. I know they're going to be blasted, but at least I know I did everything I could to stop it. How do you think they are going to be feeling at home on Yord from tomorrow on?" "Maybe we can still stop it," Brion said, shrugging off the feeling of gloom. Telt's only answer was a wordless sound of disgust. By the time they had cut a large loop in the desert, the sun was well up in the sky. The daily heat begun. Their course took them through a chain of low, flinty hills that cut their speed almost to zero. They ground ahead in a low gear, while Telt sweated and cursed, struggling with the controls. Then they were on firm sand, and picking up speed toward the city. As soon as Brion saw Hovedstad clearly, he felt a clutch of fear. From somewhere in the city, a black plume of smoke was rising. It could have been one of the deserted buildings aflame, a minor blaze. Yet the closer they came, the greater his tension grew. Brion didn't dare put it into words himself. It was Telt who vocalized the thought. "A fire or something, coming from your area, somewhere close to your building." Within the city they saw the first signs of destruction. Broken rubble on the streets, the smell of greasy smoke in their nostrils. More and more people appeared, going in the same direction they were. The normally deserted streets of Hovedstad were now almost crowded. Disans, obvious by their bare shoulders, mixed with the few off-worlders who still remained. Brion made sure the tarpaulin was well wrapped around the body before they pushed the sandcar slowly through the growing crowd. "I don't like all this publicity," Telt complained, looking at the people. "It's the last day, or I'd be turning back. They know our cars, we've raided them often enough." Turning a corner, he braked suddenly, mouth agape. Ahead was destruction. Black, broken rubble had been churned into desolation. It was still smoking, pink tongues of flame licking over the ruins. A fragment of wall fell with a rumbling crash.
It's your building, the Foundation building,
Telt shouted.
"They've been here ahead of us. Must have used the radio to call a raid. They did a job. Explosives of some kind."
Hope was dead. Dis was dead. In the ruin ahead, mixed and broken with other rubble, were the bodies of all the people who had trusted him. Leah. Beautiful and cruelly dead Leah. Dr. Stein, his patients, Fossil, all of them. He had kept them on this planet, and now they were dead. Every one of them, dead. Murderer. End of chapter 13. Chapter 14 of Planet of the Damned. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Planet of the Damned by Harry Harrison. Chapter 14. Life was ended. Brion's mind contained nothing but despair, and the pain of irretrievable loss. If his brain had been completely the master of his body, he would have died there, for at that moment there was no will to live. Unaware of this, his heart continued to beat, and the regular motion of his lungs drew in the dreadful sweetness of the smoke-tainted air. With automatic directness, his body lived on. "What are you going to do?" Telt asked, even his natural exuberance stilled by this. Brion only shook his head, as the words penetrated. What could he do? What could possibly be done? "Follow me," a voice said, in guttural Disan, through the opening of a rear window. The speaker was lost in the crowd before they could turn. Aware now, Brion saw a native move away from the edge of the crowd, and turned to look in their direction. It was Ulv. "Turn the car, that way." He punched Telt's arm and pointed. "Do it slowly, and don't draw any attention to us." For a moment there was hope, which he kept himself from considering. The building was gone and the people in it all dead. That fact had to be faced. "What's going on?" Telt asked. "Who was that talked in the window?" "A native, that one up ahead. He saved my life in the desert and I think he is on our side. Even though he's a native Disan, he can understand facts that magter can't. He knows what will happen to this planet." Brion was talking to fill his brain with words, so he wouldn't begin to have hope. There was no hope possible. Ulv moved slowly and naturally through the streets, never looking back. They followed, as far behind as they dared, yet still keeping him in sight. Fewer people were about here, among the deserted off-world storehouses. Ulv vanished into one of these. "Light Metals Trust Limited," the sign read above the door. Telt slowed the car. "Don't stop here," Brion said. "Drive around the corner and pull up." Brion climbed out of the car with an ease he did not feel. No one was in sight now, in either direction. Walking slowly back to the corner, he checked the street they had just left. Hot, silent, and empty. A sudden blackness appeared where the door of the warehouse had been, and the sudden flickering motion of a hand. Brion signaled Telt to start, and jumped into the already moving sand car. "Into that open door, quickly, before anyone sees us." The car rumbled down a ramp into the dark interior, and the door slid shut behind them.
"Oh, what is it? Where are you?"
Brion called, blinking in the murky interior. A gray form appeared beside him.
"I am here."
"Did you?" There was no way to finish the sentence.
"I heard of the raid. The magter called together all of us they could to help them carry explosive. I went along. I could not stop them and there was no time to warn anyone in the building."
"Then they are all dead."
"Yes,"
Ulv nodded.
"all except one. I knew I could perhaps save one, I was not sure who, so I took the woman you were with in the desert. She is here now. She was hurt, but not badly when I brought her out."
Guilty relief flooded through Brion. He shouldn't exult, not with the death of everyone in the Foundation still fresh in his mind. But at that instant he was happy. "Let me see her," he said to Ulv. He was seized by the sudden fear that there might be a mistake. Perhaps Ulv had saved a different woman. Ulv led the way across the empty loading bay. Brion followed closely, fighting down the temptation to tell him to hurry. When he saw that Ulv was heading toward an office in the far wall, he could control himself no longer and ran on ahead. It was Leah, lying unconscious on a couch. Sweat beaded her face and she moaned and stirred without opening her eyes.
"I gave her silver, then wrapped her in a cloth so no one would know,"
Ulv said. Telt was close behind them, looking in through the open door. "Silver is a drug they take from one of their plants," he said. "We got a lot of experience with it. A little makes a good knockout drug, but it's a deadly poison in large doses. I got the antidote in the car. Wait and I'll get it." He went out. Brion sat next to Leah and wiped her face clean of dirt and perspiration. The dark shadows under her eyes were almost black now, and her elfin face seemed even thinner. But she was alive, that was the important thing. Some of the tension drained away from Brion, and he could think again. There was still the job to do. After this last experience, Leah should be in a hospital bed. But this was impossible. He would have to drag her to her feet and put her back to work. The answer might still be found. Each second ticked away another fraction of the planet's life. "Good as new in a minute," Telt said, banging down the heavy med box. He watched intently as Ulv left the room. His should know about this renegade. Might be useful as a spy or for information, though of course it's too late now to do anything, so hell with it. He pulled a pistol-shaped hypodermic gun from the box and dialed a number on the side. "Now if you'll roll her sleeve up, I'll bring her back to life." He pressed the bell-shaped sterilizing muzzle against her skin and pulled the trigger. The hypogun hummed briefly, ending its cycle with a loud click. "Does it work fast?" Brion asked. "Couple of minutes. Just let her be and she'll come to by herself." Ulv was in the doorway.
"Kill her,"
he hissed. His blowgun was in his hand, half raised to his mouth. He's been in the car, he's seen it, Telt shouted, and grabbed for his gun. Brion sprang between them, raising his hand. Stop it! No more killing! He shouted in Disan. Then he shook his fist at Telt. Fire that gun and I'll stuff it down your throat! I'll handle this! He turned to face Ulv, who hadn't brought the blowgun any closer to his lips. This was a good sign. The Disan was still uncertain. You have seen the body in the car, Ulv, so you must have seen that it is that of a magter. I killed him myself because I would rather kill 1 or 10 or even 100 men than have everyone on this planet destroyed. I killed him in a fair fight, and now I am going to examine his body. There is something very strange and different about the magter. You know that yourself. If I can find out what it is, perhaps we can make them stop this war and not bomb Njord. Ulv was still angry, but he lowered the blowgun a little.
I wish there were no off-worlders, he said. I wish that none of you had ever come. Nothing was wrong until you started coming. The magter were the strongest and they killed, but they also helped. Now they want to fight a war with your weapons, and for this you are going to kill my world. And you want me to help you?
Not me, yourself, Brion said wearily. There's no going back, that's the one thing we can't do. Maybe Dis would have been better off without off-planet contact, maybe not. In any case, you have to forget about that. You have contact now with the rest of the galaxy, for better or for worse. You've got a problem to solve, and I'm here to help you solve it. Seconds ticked by, as Ulv, unmoving, fought with the questions that were novel to his life. Could killing stop death? Could he help his people by helping strangers to fight and kill them? His world had changed, and he didn't like it. He must make a giant effort to change with it. Abruptly, he pushed the blowgun into a thong at his waist, turned, and strode out. Too much for my nerves, Telt said, settling his gun back in the holster. You don't know how happy I'm going to be when this whole damn thing is over. Even if the planet goes bang, I don't care, I'm finished. He walked out to the sand car, keeping a careful eye on the Disan crouched against the wall. Brion turned back to Leah, whose eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. He went to her. Running, she said, and her voice had a toneless emptiness that screamed louder than any emotion. They ran by the open door of my room, and I could see them when they killed Dr. Stein. Just butchered him like an animal, chopping him down. Then one came into the room, and that's all I remember. She turned her head slowly and looked at Brion. What happened? Why am I here? They're dead, he told her. All of them. After the raid, the Disans blew up the building. You're the only one that survived. That was Ulv who came into your room, the Disan we met in the desert. He brought you away and hid you here in the city. When do we leave? She asked in the same empty tones, turning her face to the wall. When do we get off this planet? Today is the last day. The deadline is midnight. Kraft will have a ship pick us up when we are ready, but we still have our job to do. I've got that body. You're going to have to examine it. We must find out about the magter. Nothing can be done now except leave. Her voice was a dull monotone. There is only so much that a person can do, and I've done it. Please have the ship come. I want to leave now. Brion bit his lip in helpless frustration. Nothing seemed to penetrate the apathy into which she had sunk. Too much shock, too much terror, in too short a time. He took her chin in his hand and turned her head to face him. She didn't resist, but her eyes were shining with tears. Tears trickled down her cheeks. Take me home, Brion. Please take me home. He could only brush her sodden hair back from her face and force himself to smile at her. The moments of time were running out, faster and faster, and he no longer knew what to do. The examination had to be made, yet he couldn't force her. He looked for the med box and saw that Telt had taken it back to the sand car. There might be something in it that could help. A tranquilizer, perhaps. Telt had some of his instruments open on the chart table, and was examining a tape with a pocket magnifier when Brion entered. He jumped nervously and put the tape behind his back, then relaxed when he saw who it was. I thought you were the creepy out there coming for a look, he whispered. Maybe you can trust him, but I can't afford to. Can't even use the radio. I'm getting out of here now. I have to tell Hiss. Tell him what? Brion asked sharply. What is all the mystery about? Telt handed him the magnifier and tape. Look at that. Recording tape from my scintillation counter. Red verticals are 5-minute intervals. The wiggly black horizontal line is the radioactivity level. All this where the line goes up and down, that's when we were driving out to the attack. Varying hot level of the rock and ground.
What's the big peak in the middle? That coincides exactly with our visit to the House of Horrors.
When we went through the hole in the bottom of the tower. He couldn't keep the excitement out of his voice. Does that mean that, I don't know, I'm not sure. I have to compare it with the other tapes back at base. It could be the stone of the tower. Some of these heavy rocks have got a high natural count. There maybe could be a box of instruments there with fluorescent dials. Or it might be one of those tactical atom bombs they threw at us already. Some arms runner sold them a few. Or it could be the cobalt bombs? It could be, Telt said, packing his instruments swiftly. A badly shielded bomb, or an old one with a crack in the skin, could give a trace like that. Just a little radon leaking out would do it. Why don't you call Hiss on the radio and let him know? I don't want Granddaddy Kraft's listening post to hear about it. This is our job, if I'm right. And I have to check my old tapes to make sure. But it's going to be worth a raid. I can feel that in my bones. Let's unload your corpse. He helped Brion with the clumsy wrapped bundle, then slipped into the driver's seat. Hold it, Brion said. Do you have anything in the med box I can use for Leah? She seems to have cracked. Not hysterical, but withdrawn. Won't listen to reason. Won't do anything but lie there and ask to go home. Got the potion here, Telt said, cracking the med box. Slaughter syndrome is what our medics call it. Hit a lot of our boys. Grow up all your life hating the idea of violence, and it goes rough when you have to start killing people. Guys break up, break down, go to pieces lots of different ways. The medic mixed up this stuff. Don't know how it works, probably tranquilizers and some of the cortex drugs. But it peels off recent memories. Maybe for the last 10, 12 hours. You can't get upset about what you don't remember. He pulled out a sealed package. Directions on the box. Good luck. Luck, Brion said, and shook the technician's calloused hand. Let me know if the traces are strong enough to be bombs. He checked the street to make sure it was clear, then pressed the door button. The sandcar churned out into the brilliant sunshine and was gone, the throb of its motor dying in the distance. Brion closed the door and went back to Leah. Ulv was still crouched against the wall. There was a one-shot disposable hypodermic in the box. Leah made no protest when he broke the seal and pressed the needle against her arm. She sighed, and her eyes closed again. When he saw that she was resting easily, he dragged in the tarpaulin-wrapped body of the magter. A workbench ran along one wall, and he struggled the corpse up onto it. He unwrapped the tarpaulin, and the sightless eyes stared accusingly up into his. Using his knife, Brion cut away the loose, blood-soaked clothing. Strapped under the clothes, around the man's waist, was the familiar collection of Disan artifacts. This could have significance either way. Human or humanoid, the creature would still have to live on Dis. Brion threw it aside, along with the clothing. Nude, pierced, bloody, the corpse lay before him. In every external physical detail, the man was human. Brion's theory was becoming more preposterous with each discovery. If the magter weren't alien, how could he explain their complete lack of emotions? A mutation of some kind? He didn't see how it was possible. There had to be something alien about the dead man before him. The future of a world rested on this flimsy hope. If Telt's lead to the bombs proved to be false, there would be no hope left at all. Leah was still unconscious when he looked at her again. There was no way of telling how long the coma would last. He would probably have to waken her out of it, but he didn't want to do it too early. It took an effort to control his impatience, even though he knew the drug needed time in which to work. He finally decided on at least a minimum of an hour before he should try to disturb her. That would be noon. 12 hours before destruction. One thing he should do was to get in touch with Professor Commander Kraft. Maybe it was being defeatist, but he had to make sure they had a way off this planet if the mission failed. Kraft had installed a relay radio that would forward calls from his personal set. If this relay had been in the Foundation building, Contact was broken. This had to be found out before it was too late. Brion thumbed on his radio and sent the call. The reply came back instantly. "This is Fleet Communications. Will you please keep this circuit open? Commander Kraft is waiting for this call and it is being put directly through to him now." Kraft's voice broke in while the operator was still talking.
"Who is making this call? Is it anyone from the Foundation?"
The old man's voice was shaky with emotion. "Brandd here. I have Leah Maurice with me."
"No more? Are there no other survivors from the disaster that destroyed your building?"
"That's it. Other than us, it's a complete loss. With the building and all the instruments gone, I have no way to contact our ship in orbit. Can you arrange to get us out of here if necessary?"
"Give me your location. A ship is coming now."
"I don't need a ship now," Brion interrupted. "Don't send it until I call. If there is a way to stop your destruction, I'll find it. So I'm staying to the last minute if necessary." Kraft was silent. There was only the cackle of an open mic, and the sound of breathing.
"That is your decision,"
he said, finally.
"I'll have a ship standing by. But won't you let us take Miss Maurice out now?"
"No, I need her here. We are still working, looking for—"
"What answer can you find that could possibly avert destruction now?"
His tone was between hope and despair. Brion couldn't help him. "If I succeed, you'll know. Otherwise, that will be the end of it. End of transmission." He switched the radio off. Leah was sleeping easily when he looked at her, and there was still a good part of the hour left before he could wake her. How could he put it to use? She would need tools, instruments to examine the corpse, and there were certainly none here. Perhaps he could find some in the ruins of the Foundation building. With this thought, he had the sudden desire to see the wreckage up close. There might be other survivors. He had to find out. If he could talk to the men he had seen working there. Ulv was still crouched against the wall in the outer room. He looked up angrily when Brion came over, but said nothing. "Will you help me again?" Brion asked. "Stay and watch the girl while I go out. I'll be back at noon." Ulv didn't answer. "I am still looking for the way to save Dis," Brion added.
Go. I'll watch the girl.
Ulv spat the words in impotent fury.
I do not know what to do. You may be right. Go, she will be safe with me.
Brion slipped out into the deserted street, and half running, half walking, made his way towards the rubble that had been the Cultural Relationships Foundation. He used a different course from the one they had come by, striking first toward the outer edge of the city. Once there, he could swing and approach from the other side, so there would be no indication where he had come from. The magter might be watching, and he didn't want to lead them to Leah and the stolen body. Turning a corner, he saw a sand car stopped in the street ahead. There was something familiar about the lines of it. It could be the one he and Telt had used, but he wasn't sure. He looked around, but the dusty, packed dirt street was white and empty, shimmering in the silence under the sun. Staying close to the wall and watching carefully, Brion slipped towards the car. When he came close behind it, he was positive it was the one he had been in the night before. What was it doing here? Silence and heat filled the street. Windows and doors were empty, and there was no motion in their shadows. Putting his foot on a bogey wheel, he reached up and grabbed the searing metal rim of the open window. He pulled himself up and stared at Telt's smiling face. Smiling in death, the lips pulled back to reveal the grinning teeth, the eyes bursting from the head, the features swollen and contorted from the deadly poison. A tiny, tufted dart of wood stuck in the brown flesh on the side of his neck. End of chapter 14. Chapter 15 of Planet of the Damned. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Planet of the Damned by Harry Harrison. Chapter 15. Brion hurled himself backwards and sprawled flat in the dust and filth of the road. No poisoned dart sought him out. The empty silence still reigned, Telt's murderers had come and gone. Moving quickly, using the bulk of the car as a shield, he opened the door and slipped inside. They had done a thorough job of destruction. All of the controls had been battered into uselessness. The floor was a junk heap of crushed equipment, intertwined with loops of recording tape bulging like mechanical intestines. A gutted machine, destroyed like its driver. It was easy enough to reconstruct what had happened. The car had been seen when they entered the city, probably by some of the magter who had destroyed the Foundation building. They had not seen where it had gone, or Brion would surely be dead by now. But they must have spotted it when Telt tried to leave the city, and stopped it in the most effective way possible, a dart through the open window into the unsuspecting driver's neck. Telt dead. The brutal impact of the man's death had driven all thought of its consequences from Brion's mind. Now he began to realize. Telt had never sent word of his discovery of the radioactive trace to the Nyord army. He had been afraid to use the radio, and had wanted to tell Hiss in person and to show him the tape. Only, now the tape was torn and mixed with all the others, the brain that could have analyzed it, dead. Brion looked at the dangling entrails of the radio and spun for the door. Running swiftly and erratically, he fled from the sand car. His own survival and the possible survival of Dis depended on his not being seen near it. He must contact Hiss and pass on the information. Until he did that, he was the only offworlder on Dis who knew which magter tower might contain the world-destroying bombs. Once out of sight of the sand car, he went more slowly, wiping the sweat from his streaming face. He hadn't been seen leaving the car, and he wasn't being followed. The streets here weren't familiar, but he checked his direction by the sun and walked at a steady pace toward the destroyed building. More of the native Disans were in the streets now. They all noticed him. Some even stopped and scowled fiercely at him. With his emphatic awareness, he felt their anger and hatred. A knot of men radiated death, and he put his hand on his gun as he passed them. 2 of them had their blowguns ready, but didn't use them. By the time he had turned the next corner, he was soaked with nervous perspiration. Ahead was the rubble of the destroyed building. Grounded next to it was the tapered form of a spacer's pinnace. 2 men had come from the open lock, and were standing at the edge of the burnt area. Brion's boots grated loudly on the broken wreckage. The men turned quickly towards him, guns raised. Both of them carried ion rifles. They relaxed when they saw his off-world clothes. "Bloody damn savages," one of them growled. He was a heavy planet man, a squashed down column of muscle and gristle, whose head barely reached Brion's chest. A pushed back cap had the crossed slide rule symbol of a ship's computer man. "Can't blame them, I guess," the second man said. He wore purser's insignia. His features were different, but with the same compacted body the 2 men were as physically alike as twins, probably from the same home planet. "They're gonna get their whole world blown out from under them at midnight. Looks as if the poor slob in the street finally realized what is happening. Hope we're in jump space by then. I saw Estrada's world get it, and I don't want to see that again. Not twice in one lifetime." The computer man was looking closely at Brion, head tilted sideways to see his face. "You need transportation off-world?" he asked. "We're the last ship at the port, and we're going to boil out of here as soon as the rest of our cargo is aboard. We'll give you a lift if you need it." Only by a tremendous effort at control did Brion conceal the destroying sorrow that overwhelmed him when he looked at that shattered wasteland, the graveyard of so many. "No," he said, "that won't be necessary. I'm in touch with the blockading fleet and they'll pick me up before midnight." "You from Nyord?" the purser growled. "No," Brion said, still only half aware of the men, "but there is trouble with my own ship." He realized that they were looking intently at him, that he owed them some kind of explanation. "I thought I could find a way to stop the war. Now, I'm not so sure." He hadn't intended to be so frank with the spaceman, but the words had been uppermost in his thoughts, and had simply slipped out. The computer man started to say something, but his shipmate speared him in his side with his elbow. "We blast soon, and I don't like the way these Disans are looking at us. The captain said to find out what caused the fire and then get the hell back, so let's go." "Don't miss your ship," the computer man said to Brion, and he started for the pinnace. Then he hesitated and turned. Sure there's nothing we can do for you? Sorrow would accomplish nothing. Brion fought to sweep the dregs of emotion from his mind, and to think clearly. You can help me, he said. I could use a scalpel, or any other surgical instrument you might have. Leah would need those. Then he remembered Telt's undelivered message. Do you have a portable radio transceiver? I can pay you for it. The computer man vanished inside the rocket, and reappeared a minute later with a small package. There's a scalpel and a magnetized tweezers in there. All I could find in the medkit. Hope they'll do. He reached inside and swung out the metal case of a self-contained transceiver. Take this, it's got plenty of range even on the longer frequencies. He raised his hand at Brion's offer to pay. My donation, he said. If you can save this planet, I'll give you the whole pinnace as well. We'll tell the captain we lost the radio in some trouble with the natives. Isn't that right, Moneybags? He prodded the purser in the chest with a finger that would have punched a hole through a weaker man. I read you loud and clear, the purser said. I'll make out an invoice so stating back in the ship. They were both in the pinnace then, and Brion had to move fast to get clear of the takeoff blast. A sense of obligation. The spaceman had felt it too. The realization of this raised Brion's spirits a bit as he searched through the rubble for anything useful. He recognized part of a wall still standing as a corner of the laboratory. Poking through the ruins, he unearthed broken instruments and a single, battered case that had barely missed destruction. Inside was the binocular microscope. The right tube bent, its lenses cracked and obscured. The left eyepiece still seemed to be functioning. Brion carefully put it back in the case. He looked at his watch. It was almost noon. These few pieces of equipment would have to do for the dissection. Watched suspiciously by the onlooking Disans, he started back to the warehouse. It was a long, circuitous walk, since he didn't dare give any clues to his destination. Only when he was positive he had not been observed or followed did he slip through the building's entrance, locking the door behind him. Leah's frightened eyes met him when he went into the office. A friendly smile here among the cannibals, she called. Her strained expression gave the lie to the cheeriness of her words. What has happened? Since I woke up, the great stone face over there, she pointed to Ulf, has been telling me exactly nothing. What's the last thing you can remember? Brion asked carefully. He didn't want to tell her too much, lest this bring on the shock again. Ulf had shown great presence of mind in not talking to her. If you must know, Leah said, I remember quite a lot, Brion Brandd. I shan't go into details, since this sort of thing is best kept from the natives. For the record then, I can recall going to sleep after you left, and nothing since then. It's weird, I went to sleep in that lumpy hospital bed and woke up on this couch, feeling simply terrible, with him just sitting there and scowling at me. Won't you please tell me what's going on? A partial truth was best, saving all the details that he could for later. The magter attacked the Foundation building, he said. They are getting angry at all off-worlders now. You were still knocked out by a sleeping drug, so Ulf helped bring you here. It's afternoon now. Of the last day? She sounded horrified. While I'm playing Sleeping Beauty, the world is coming to an end. Was anyone hurt in the attack? Or killed? There were a number of casualties, and plenty of trouble, Brion said. He had to get her off the subject. Walking over to the corpse, he threw back the cover from its face. But this is more important right now. It's one of the magter. I have a scalpel and some other things here. Will you perform an autopsy? Leah huddled back on the couch, her arms around herself, looking chilled in spite of the heat of the day. What happened to all the people at the building? She asked in a thin voice. The injection had removed her memories of the tragedy, but echoes of the strain and shock still reverberated in her mind and body. I feel so exhausted. Please tell me what happened. I have the feeling you're hiding something. Brion sat next to her and took her hands in his, not surprised to find them cold. Looking into her eyes, he tried to give her some of his strength. It wasn't very nice, he said. You were shaken up by it. I imagine that's why you feel the way you do now. But, Leah, you'll have to take my word for this. Don't ask any more questions. There's nothing we can do now about it. But we can still find out about the magter. Will you examine the corpse? She started to ask something, then changed her mind. When she dropped her eyes, Brion felt the thin shiver that went through her body. "There's something terribly wrong," she said. "I know that. I guess I'll have to take your word that it's best not to ask questions. Help me up, will you, darling? My legs are absolutely liquid." Leaning on him, with his arm around her supporting most of her weight, she went slowly across to the corpse. She looked down and shuddered. "Not what you would call a natural death," she said. Ulv watched intently as she took the scalpel out of its holder. "You don't have to look at this," she told him in halting Disan. "Not if you don't want to."
"I want to,"
he told her, not taking his eyes from the body.
"I have never seen a magter dead before. Or without covering, like an ordinary person."
He continued to stare fixedly. "Find me some drinking water, will you, Brion?" Leah said. "And spread the tarp under the body. These things are quite messy." After drinking the water she seemed stronger, and could stand without holding onto the table with both hands. Placing the tip of the scalpel just below the magister's breastbone, she made the long post-mortem incision down to the pubic symphysis. The great body-length wound gaped open like a red mouth. Across the table, Ulv shuddered, but didn't avert his eyes. One by one she removed the internal organs. Once she looked up at Brion, then quickly returned to work. The silence stretched on, until Brion had to break it. "Tell me, can't you? Have you found out anything?" His words snapped the thin strand of her strength, and she staggered back to the couch and collapsed onto it. Her blood-stained hands hung over the side, making a strangely terrible contrast to the whiteness of her skin. "I'm sorry, Brion," she said, "but there's nothing at all. There are minor differences, organic changes I've never seen before. His liver is tremendous for one thing, but changes like this are certainly consistent within the pattern of Homo sapiens as adapted to a different planet. He's a man, changed, adapted, modified, but still just as human as you or I." "How can you be sure?" Brion broke in. "You haven't examined him completely, have you?" She shook her head. "Then go on. The other organs, his brain, a microscopic examination. Here," he said, pushing the microscope case toward her with both hands. She dropped her head onto her forearms and sobbed. "Leave me alone, can't you? I'm tired and sick and fed up with this awful planet. Let them die, I don't care. Your theory is false, useless, admit that. And let me watch this filth from my hands." Sobbing drowned out her words. Brion stood over her and drew a shuddering breath. Was he wrong? He didn't dare think about that. He had to go on. Looking down at the thinness of her bent back, with the tiny projections of her spine showing through the thin cloth, he felt an immense pity, a pity he couldn't surrender to. This thin, helpless, frightened woman was his only resource. She had to work. He had to make her work. Isle had done it, used projective empathy to impress his emotions upon Brion. Now Brion must do it with Leah. He had had some sessions in the art, but not nearly enough to make him proficient. Nevertheless, he had to try. Strength was what Leah needed. Aloud, he said simply, "You can do it. You have the will and the strength to finish." And silently, his mind cried out the order to obey, to share his power now that hers was drained and finished. Only when she lifted her face and he saw the dried tears did he realize that he had succeeded. "Will you go on?" he asked quietly. Leah merely nodded and rose to her feet. She shuffled like a sleepwalker jerked along by invisible strings. Her strength wasn't her own, and the situation reminded him unhappily of that last event of the 20s, when he had experienced the same kind of draining activity. She wiped her hands roughly on her clothes and opened the microscope case. "The slides are all broken," she said. "This will do," Brion told her, crashing his heel through the glass partition. Shards tinkled and crashed to the floor. He took some of the bigger pieces and broke them to rough squares that would fit under the clips on the stage. Leah accepted them without a word. Putting a drop of the magister's blood on the slide, she bent over the eyepiece. Her hands shook when she tried to adjust the focusing. Using low power, she examined the specimen, squinting through the angled tube. Once, she turned the substage mirror a bit to catch the light streaming in the window. Brion stood behind her, fists clenched, forcibly controlling his anxiety. "What do you see?" he finally blurted out. "Phagocytes, platelets, leukocytes. Everything seems normal." Her voice was dull, exhausted, her eyes blinking with fatigue as she stared into the tube. Anger at defeat burned through Brion. Even faced with failure, he refused to accept it. He reached over her shoulder and savagely twisted the turret of the microscope until the longest lens was in position. "If you can't see anything, try the higher power. It's there, I know it's there. I'll get you a tissue specimen." He turned back to the disemboweled cadaver. His back was turned, and he did not see that sudden stiffening of her shoulders, or the sudden eagerness that seized her fingers as they adjusted the focus. But he did feel the wave of emotion that welled from her, impinging directly on his empathetic sense. "What is it?" he called to her, as if she had spoken aloud. Something here," she said, "in this leukocyte. It's not normal structure, but it's familiar. I've seen something like this before, but I just can't remember." She turned away from the microscope and unthinkingly pressed her gory knuckles to her forehead. "I know I've seen it before." Brion squinted into the deserted microscope and made out a dim shape in the center of the field. It stood out sharply when he focused, the white jellyfish shape of a single-celled leukocyte. To his untrained eye, there was nothing unusual about it. He couldn't know what was strange when he had no idea what was normal. "Do you see those spherical green shapes grouped together?" Leah asked. Before Brion could answer, she gasped, "I remember now!" Her fatigue was forgotten in her excitement. "Acheria purchasi, that was the name. Something like that. It's a coccid, a little scale insect. It had those same shapes collected together within its individual cells." "What do they mean? What is the connection with Dis?" "I don't know," she said. "It's just that they look so similar. And I never saw anything like this in a human cell before. In the coccids, the green particles grow into a kind of yeast that lives within the insect. Not a parasite, but a real symbiote." Her eyes opened wide as she caught the significance of her own words. A symbiote. And Dis was the world where symbiosis and parasitism had become more advanced and complex than on any other planet. Leah's thoughts spun around this fact and chewed at the fringes of the logic. Brion could sense her concentration and absorption. He did nothing to break the mood. Her hands were clenched, her eyes staring unseeingly at the wall as her mind raced. Brion and Ulv were quiet, watching her, waiting for her conclusions. The pieces were falling into shape at last. Leah opened her clenched hands and smoothed them on her sodden skirt. She blinked and turned to Brion. "Is there a toolbox here?" she asked. Her words were so unexpected that Brion could not answer for a moment. Before he could say anything, she spoke again. "Not hand tools, that would take too long. Could you find anything like a power saw? That would be ideal." She turned back to the microscope, and he didn't try to question her. Ulv was still looking at the body of the magter, and had understood nothing of what they had said. Brion went out into the loading bay. There was nothing he could use on the ground floor, so he took the stairs to the floor above. A corridor here passed by a number of rooms. All of the doors were locked, including one with the hopeful sign, "Tool Room," on it. He battered at the metal door with his shoulder without budging it. As he stepped back to look for another way in, he glanced at his watch. 2 o'clock. In 10 hours, the bombs would fall on Dis. The need for haste tore at him, yet there could be no noise. Someone in the street might hear it. He quickly stripped off his shirt and wrapped it in a loose roll around the barrel of his gun, extending it in a loose tube in front of the barrel. Holding the rolled cloth in his left hand, he jammed the gun up tight against the door, the muzzle against the lock. The single shot was only a dull thud, inaudible outside of the building. Pieces of broken mechanism jarred and rattled inside the lock, and the door swung open. When he came back, Leah was standing by the body. He held a small power saw with a rotary blade. "Will this do?" he asked. "Runs on its own batteries, almost fully charged too." "Perfect," she answered. "You're both going to have to help me." She switched into the Disan language. "Ulv, would you find some place where you can watch the street without being seen? Signal me when it's empty. I'm afraid the saw is going to make a lot of noise." Ulv nodded and went out into the bay. where he climbed a heap of empty crates so he could peer through the small windows set high in the wall. He looked carefully in both directions, then waved to her to go ahead. "Stand to one side and hold the cadaver's chin, Brion," she said. "Hold it firmly so the head doesn't shake around when I cut. This is going to be a little gruesome, I'm sorry, but it'll be the fastest way to cut the bone." The saw bit into the skull. Once, Ulv waved them into silence, and shrank back himself into the shadows next to the window. They waited impatiently until he gave them the sign to continue again. Brion held steady while the saw cut a complete circle around the skull. "Finished," Leah said, and the saw dropped from her limp fingers to the floor. She massaged life back into her hands before she finished the job. Carefully and delicately, she removed the cap of bone from the magter's head, exposing his brain to the shaft of light from the window. "You were right all this time, Brion," she said. "There is your alien." End of chapter 15. Chapter 16 of Planet of the Damned. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Planet of the Damned by Harry Harrison. Chapter 16. Ulv joined them as they looked down at the exposed brain of the magter. The thing was so clearly evident that even Ulv noticed it.
I have seen dead animals, and my people dead with their heads open. But I have never seen anything like that before, he said.
"What is it?" Brion asked. "The invader, the alien you were looking for," Leah told him. The magter's brain was only 2/3 of what would have been its normal size. Instead of filling the skull completely, it shared the space with a green amorphous shape. This was ridged, somewhat like a brain, but the green shape had still darker nodules and extensions. Leah took her scalpel and gently prodded the dark, moist mass. "It reminds me very much of something that I've seen before on Earth," she said. "The green fly, Drepanosiphum plantonoides, and an unusual organ it has called the pseudova. Now that I have seen this growth in the magter's skull, I can think of a positive parallel. The fly Drepanosiphum also has a large green organ, only it fills half the body cavity instead of the head. Its identity puzzled biologists for years, and they had a number of complex theories to explain it. Finally, someone managed to dissect and examine it. The pseudova turned out to be a living plant, a yeast-like growth that helps with the green fly's digestion. It produces enzymes that enable the fly to digest the great amounts of sugar it gets from plant juice." "That's not unusual," Brion said, puzzled. "Termites and human beings are a couple of other creatures whose digestion is helped by internal flora. What's the difference in the green fly?" "Reproduction mainly. All the other gut-living plants have to enter the host and establish themselves as outsiders, permitted to remain as long as they are useful. The green fly and its yeast plant have a permanent symbiotic relationship that is essential to the existence of both. The plant spores appear in many places throughout the fly's body, but they are always in the germ cells. Every cell has some, and every egg cell that grows to maturity is infected with the plant spores. The continuation of the symbiosis is unbroken and guaranteed." "Do you think those green spheres in the magter's blood cells could be the same kind of thing?" Brion asked. "I'm sure of it," Leah said. "It must be the same process. There are probably green spheres throughout the magter's bodies, spores, or offspring of those things living in their brains. Enough will find their way to the germ cells to make sure that every young magter is infected at birth. While the child is growing, so is the symbiote, probably a lot faster since it seems to be a simpler organism. I imagine it is well established in the brain pan within the first 6 months of the infant's life." "But why?" Brion asked. "What does it do?" "I'm only guessing now, but there is plenty of evidence that gives us an idea of its function. I'm willing to bet that the symbiote itself is not a simple organism. It's probably an amalgam of plant and animal, like most other creatures on Dis. The thing is just too complex to have developed since mankind has been on this planet. The magter must have caught the symbiotic infection eating some Disan animal. The symbiote lived and flourished in its new environment, well protected by a bony skull and a long-lived host. In exchange for food, oxygen, and comfort, the brain symbiote must generate hormones and enzymes that enable the magter to survive. Some of these might aid digestion, enabling the magter to eat any plant or animal life they can lay their hands on. The symbiote might produce sugar, scavenge the blood of toxins. There are so many things it could do. Things it must have done, since the magter are obviously the dominant life form on this planet. They paid a high price for the symbiote, but it didn't matter to race survival until now. Did you notice that the magter's brain is no smaller than normal? It must be. Or how else could that brain symbiote fit inside the skull with it? Brion said. If the magter's total brain were smaller in volume than normal, it could fit into the remaining space in the cranial hollow. But the brain is full-sized, it's just that part of it is missing, absorbed by the symbiote. The frontal lobes, Brion said with sudden realization. This hellish growth has performed a prefrontal lobotomy. It's done even more than that, Leah said, separating the convolutions of gray matter with her scalpel to uncover a green filament beneath. These tendrils penetrate further back into the brain, but always remain within the cerebrum. The cerebellum appears to be untouched. Apparently just the higher functions of mankind have been interfered with, selectively. Destruction of the frontal lobes made the magter creatures without emotion, or the ability for really abstract thought. Apparently they survived better without these. There must have been some horrible failures before the right balance was struck. The final product is a man-plant-animal symbiote that is admirably adapted for survival on this disaster world. No emotions to cause complications or desires that might interfere with pure survival. Complete ruthlessness. Mankind has always been strong on this anyway, so it didn't take much of a push. The other Disans, like Anvhar, managed to survive without turning into such a creature, so why was it necessary for the magter to go so far? Nothing is necessary in evolution, you know that, Leah said. Many variations are possible, and all the better ones continue. You might say that Ulv's people survive, but the magter survive better. If off-world contact hadn't been re-established, I imagine the magter would slowly have become the dominant race. Only they won't have the chance now. It looks as though they have succeeded in destroying both races with their suicidal urge. That's the part that doesn't make sense, Brion said. The magter have survived and climbed right to the top of the evolutionary heap here. Yet they are suicidal. How does it happen they haven't been wiped out before this? Individually, they have been aggressive to the point of suicide. They will attack anything and everything with the same savage lack of emotion. Luckily, there are no bigger animals on this planet. So where they have died as individuals, their utter ruthlessness has guaranteed their survival as a group. Now they are faced with a problem that is too big for their half-destroyed minds to handle. Their personal policy has become their planetary policy, and that's never a smart thing. They are like men with knives who have killed all the men who were only armed with stones. Now they are facing men with guns, and they are going to keep charging and fighting until they are all dead. It's a perfect case of the utter impartiality of the forces of evolution. Men infected by this Disan life form were the dominant creatures on this planet. The creature in the magter's brains was a true symbiote then, giving something and receiving something, making a union of symbiotes where all were stronger together than any could be separately. Now this has changed. The magter brain cannot understand the concept of racial death in a situation where it must understand to be able to survive. Therefore the brain creature is no longer a symbiote, but a parasite. And as a parasite it must be destroyed, Brion broke in. We're not fighting shadows anymore, he exulted. We found the enemy, and it's not the magter at all, just a glorified tapeworm that is too stupid to know when it is killing itself off. Does it have a brain? Can it think? I doubt it very much, Leah said. A brain would be of absolutely no use to it. So even if it originally possessed reasoning powers, they would be gone by now. Symbiotes or parasites that live internally like this always degenerate to an absolute minimum of functions.
Tell me about it. What is this thing?
Ulv broke in, prodding the soft form of the brain symbiote. He had heard all their excited talk, but had not understood a word. Explain it to him, will you, Leah? As best you can, Brion said, looking at her, and he realized how exhausted she was. And sit down while you do it. You're long overdue for a rest. I'm going to try... He broke off when he looked at his watch. It was after 4 in the afternoon. Less than 8 hours to go. What was he to do? Enthusiasm faded as he realized that only half the problem was solved. The bombs would drop on schedule, unless the Nyorders could understand the significance of this discovery. Even if they understood, would it make any difference to them? The threat of the hidden cobalt bombs would not be changed. With this thought came the guilty realization that he had forgotten completely about Telt's death. Even before he contacted the Nyord fleet, he must tell Hiss and his rebel army what had happened to Telt and his sandcar. Also, about the radioactive traces. They couldn't be checked against the records now to see how important they might be, but Hiss might make another raid on the strength of the suspicion. This call wouldn't take long. Then he would be free to tackle Professor Commander Croft. Carefully setting the transmitter on the frequency of the rebel army, he sent out a call to Hiss. There was no answer. When he switched to receive, all he heard was static. There was always a chance the set was broken. He quickly twisted the transmitter to the frequency of his personal radio, then whistled in the microphone. The received signal was so loud that it hurt his ears. He tried to call Hiss again, and was relieved to get a response this time. Brion Brandd here. Can you read me? I want to talk to Hiss at once. It came as a shock that it was Professor Commander Croft who answered.
I'm sorry, Brion, but it's impossible to talk to Hiss. We are monitoring his frequency and your call was relayed to me. Hiss and his rebels lifted ship about half an hour ago, and are already on their way back to Nyord. Are you ready to leave now? It will soon become dangerous to make any landings. Even now I will have to ask for volunteers to get you out of there.
Hiss and the rebel army gone? Brion assimilated the thought. He had been thrown off balance when he realized he was talking to Croft. If they're all gone, well, then there's nothing I can do about it, he said. I was going to call you, so I can talk to you now. Listen, and try to understand. You must cancel the bombing. I found out about the magter, found what causes their mental aberration. If we can correct that, we can stop them from attacking Nyord.
Can they be corrected by midnight tonight?
Croft broke in. He was abrupt and sounded almost angry. Even saints get tired. No, of course not. Brion frowned at the microphone, realizing the talk was going all wrong, but not knowing how to remedy it. But it won't take too long. I have evidence here that will convince you that what I say is the truth.
I believe you without seeing it, Brion.
The trace of anger was gone from Croft's voice now, and it was heavy with fatigue and defeat.
I'll admit you are probably right. A little while ago I admitted to Hiss, too, that he was probably right in his original estimation of the correct way to tackle the problem of Dis. We have made a lot of mistakes, and in making them we have run out of time. I am afraid that is the only fact that is relevant now. The bombs fall at 12, and even then they may drop too late. A ship is already on its way from Nyord with my replacement. I exceeded my authority by running a day past the maximum the technicians gave me. I realize now I was gambling the life of my own world in the vain hope I could save Dis. They can't be saved. They're dead. I won't hear any more about it.
You must listen.
I must destroy the planet below me. That is what I must do. That fact will not be changed by anything you say. All the off-worlders other than your party are gone. I'm sending a ship down now to pick you up. As soon as that ship lifts, I am going to drop the first bombs. Now, tell me where you are so they can come for you.
Don't threaten me, Croft!
Brion shook his fist at the radio in an excess of anger.
You're a killer and a world destroyer! Don't try to make yourself out as anything else! I have knowledge to avert this slaughter and you won't listen to me! And I know where the cobalt bombs are, in the Magter tower that Hiss raided last night. Get those bombs and there is no need to drop any of your own!
I'm sorry, Brion. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but at the same time I know the futility of it. I'm not going to accuse you of lying, but do you realize how thin your evidence sounds from this end? First, a dramatic discovery of the cause of the Magter's intransigency. Then, when that had no results, you suddenly remember you know where the bombs are. The best-kept Magter secret.
I don't know for sure, but There is a very good chance it is so, Brion said, trying to repair his defenses. Telt made readings. He had other records of radioactivity in this same magter keep, proof that something is there. But Telt is dead now, the record's destroyed. Don't you see? He broke off, realizing how vague and unprovable his case was. This was defeat. The radio was silent, with just the hum of the carrier wave as Croft waited for him to continue. When Brion did speak, his voice was empty of all hope. "Send your ship down," he said tiredly. "We're in a building that belonged to the Light Metals Trust Limited. A big warehouse of some kind. I don't know the address here, but I'm sure you have someone there who can find it. We'll be waiting for you. You win, Croft." He turned off the radio. End of chapter 16.
Chapter 17 of Planet of the Damned. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Planet of the Damned by Harry Harrison, Chapter 17. "Do you mean what you said about giving up?" Leah asked. Brion realized that she had stopped talking to Ulv some time ago and had been listening to his conversation with Kraft. He shrugged, trying to put his feelings into words. "We've tried, and almost succeeded. But if they won't listen, what can we do? What can one man possibly do against a fleet loaded with H-bombs?" As if in answer to that question, Ulv's voice drowned him out, the harsh Disan words slashing the silence of the room. "Kill you, the enemy," he said. "Kill you, Umedvirk!" He shouted the last word and his hand flashed to his belt. In a single swift motion he lifted his blowgun and placed it to his lips. A tiny dart quivered in the already dead flesh of the creature in the magter's skull. The action had all the symbolism of a broken lance, the declaration of war. "Ulv understands it a lot better than you might think," Leah said. "He knows things about symbiosis and mutualism that would give him a job as a lecturer in any university on Earth. He knows just what the brain symbiote is and what it does. They even have a word for it, one that never appeared in our Disan language lessons. A life form that you can live with or cooperate with is called a medvirk. One that works to destroy you is a umedvirk. He also understands that life forms can change and be medvirk or umedvirk at different times. He has just decided that the brain symbiote is umedvirk, and he is out to kill it. So will the rest of the Disans as soon as he can show them the evidence and explain." "You're sure of this?" Brion asked, interested in spite of himself. "Positive. The Disans have an absolute attitude toward survival. You should realize that. Not the same as the magter, but not much different in the results. They will kill the brain symbiotes, even if it means killing every magter who harbors one." "If that is the case, we can't leave now," Brion said. With these words, it suddenly became clear what he had to do. "The ship is coming down now from the fleet. Get in it, and take the body of the magter. I won't go." "Where will you be?" she asked, shocked. "Fighting the magter. My presence on the planet means that Kraft won't keep his threat to drop the bombs any earlier than the midnight deadline. That would be deliberately murdering me. I doubt if my presence past midnight will stop him, but it should keep the bombs away at least until then." "What will you accomplish besides committing suicide?" Leah pleaded. "You just told me how a single man can't stop the bombs. What will happen to you at midnight?" "I'll be dead. But in spite of that, I can't run away. Not now. I must do everything possible right up until the last instant. Ulv and I will go to the magter tower, try to find out if the bombs are there. He will fight on our side now. He may even know more about the bombs, things that he didn't want to tell me before. We can get help from his people. Some of them must know where the bombs are, being native to this planet." Leah started to say something, but he rushed on, drowning out her words. "You have just as big a job. Show the magter to Kraft. Explain the significance of the brain parasite to him. Try to get him to talk to Heise about the last raid. Try to get him to hold off the attack. I'll keep the radio with me, and as soon as I know anything, I'll call in. This is all last resort, finger in the dike kind of stuff, but it is all we can do, because if we do nothing, it means the end of Dis. Leah tried to argue with him, but he wouldn't listen to her. He only kissed her, and with a lightness he did not feel, tried to convince her that everything would be all right. In their hearts they both knew it wouldn't be, but they left it that way because it was the least painful solution. A sudden rumbling shook the building, and the windows darkened as a ship settled in the street outside. The Niger crew came in with guns pointed, alert for anything. After a little convincing, they took the cadaver as well as Leah when they lifted ship. Brion watched the spacer become a pinpoint in the sky and vanish. He tried to shake off the feeling that this was the last time he would see any of them. "Let's get out of here fast," he told Ulf, picking up the radio, "before anyone comes around to see why the ship landed." "What will you do?" Ulf asked as they went down the street towards the desert. "What can we do in the few hours we have left?" He pointed at the sun nearing the horizon. Brion shifted the weight of the radio to his other hand before replying. "Get to the magter tower we raided last night. That's the best chance. The bombs might be there, unless you know where the bombs are." Ulf shook his head. "I do not know, but some of my people may. We will capture a magter, then kill him, so they can all see the umedvirk. Then they will tell us everything they know. The tower first, then, for bombs or a sample magter. What's the fastest way we can get there?" Ulf frowned in thought. "If you can drive one of the cars the off-worlders use, I know where there are some locked-in buildings in this city. None of my people know how they are made to move. I can work them. Let's go." Chance was with him this time. The first sandcar they found still had the keys in the lock. It was battery-powered, but contained a full charge. Much quieter than the heavy atomic cars, it sped smoothly out of the city and across the sand. Ahead of them the sun sank in a red wave of color. It was 6 o'clock. By the time they reached the tower it was 7, and Brion's nerves felt as if they were writhing under his skin. Even though it looked like suicide, attacking the tower brought blessed relief. It was movement and action, and for moments at a time he forgot the bombs hanging over his head. The attack was nerve-wrackingly anticlimactic. They used the main entrance, Ulf ranging soundlessly ahead. There was no one in sight. Once inside, they crept down towards the lower rooms where the radiation had been detected. Only gradually did they realize the magter tower was completely empty. "Everyone gone," Ulf grunted, sniffing the air in every room they passed. "Many magter were here earlier, but they are gone now." "Do they often desert their towers?" Brion asked. "Never. I have never heard of it happening before. I can think of no reason why they should do a thing like this." "Well, I can," Brion told him. "They would leave their home if they took something with them of greater value. The bombs. If the bombs were hidden here, they might move them after the attack." Sudden fear hit him. "Or they might move them because it is time to take them to the launcher. Let's get out of here the quickest way we can." "I smell air from outside," Ulf said, "coming from down there. This cannot be, because the magter have no entrances this low in their towers. We blasted one in earlier. That could be it. Can you find it?" Moonlight shone ahead as they turned an angle of the corridor, and stars were visible through the gaping opening in the wall. "It looks bigger than it was," Brion said, "as if the magter had enlarged it." He looked through and saw the tracks in the sand outside. "As if they enlarged it to bring something bulky up from below, and carried it away in whatever made those tracks." Using the opening themselves, they ran back to the sandcar. Brion ground it fiercely around and turned the headlights on the tracks. There were marks of a sandcar's tread, half obscured by thin, unmarked wheel tracks. He turned off the lights and forced himself to move slowly and to do an accurate job. A quick glimpse at his watch showed him there were 4 hours left to go. The moonlight was bright enough to illuminate the tracks. Driving with one hand, he turned on the radio transmitter, already set for Kraft's wavelength. When the operator acknowledged his signal, Brion reported what they had discovered and his conclusions. "Get that message to Commander Kraft now. I can't wait to talk to him. I'm following the tracks." He killed the transmission and stamped on the accelerator. The sandcar churned and bounced down the track. "They are going to the mountains," Ulv said some time later, as the track still pointed straight ahead. "There are caves there, and many magter have been seen near them. That is what I have heard." The guess was correct. Before 9 o'clock the ground humped into a range of foothills, and the darker masses of mountains could be seen behind them, rising up to obscure the stars. "Stop the car here," Ulv said. "The caves begin not too far ahead. There may be magter watching or listening, so we must go quietly." Brion followed the deep-cut grooves, carrying the radio. Ulv came and went on both sides, silently as a shadow, scouting for hidden watchers. As far as he could discover, there were none. By 9:30, Brion realized they had deserted the sandcar too soon. The tracks wound on and seemed to have no end. They passed some caves which Ulf pointed out to him, but the tracks never stopped. Time was running out, and the nightmare stumbling through the darkness continued. "More caves ahead," Ulf said. "Go quietly." They came cautiously to the crest of a hill, as they had done so many times already, and looked into the shadow valley beyond. Sand covered the valley floor, and the light of the setting moon shone over the tracks at a flat angle, marking them off sharply as lines of shadow. They ran straight across the sand valley and disappeared into the dark mouth of a cave on the far side. Sinking back behind the hilltop, Brion covered the pilot light with his hand and turned on the transmitter. Ulf stayed above him, staring at the opening of the cave. "This is an important message," Brion whispered into the mic. "Please record." He repeated this for 30 seconds, glancing at his watch to make sure of the time, since the seconds of waiting stretched to minutes in his brain. Then, as clearly as possible without raising his voice above a whisper, he told of the discovery of the tracks and the cave. "The bombs may or may not be in here, but we are going in to find out. I'll leave my personal transmitter here with the broadcast power turned on so you can home on its signal. That will give you a directional beacon to find the cave. I'm taking the other radio in. It has more power. If we can't get back to the entrance, I'll try a signal from inside. I doubt you will hear it because of the rock, but I'll try. End of transmission. Don't try to answer me because I have the receiver turned off. There are no earphones on this set and the speaker would be too loud here." He switched off, held his thumb on the button for an instant, then flicked it back on. "Goodbye, Leah," he said, and killed the power for good. They circled and reached the rocky wall of the cliff. Creeping silently in the shadows, they slipped up on the dark entrance of the cave. Nothing moved ahead, and there was no sound from the entrance of the cave. Brion glanced at his watch and was instantly sorry. 10:30. The last shelter concealing them was 5 meters from the cave. They started to rise, to rush the final distance, when Ulf suddenly waved Brion down. He pointed to his nose, then to the cave. He could smell the magter there. A dark figure separated itself from the greater darkness of the cave mouth. Ulf acted instantly. He stood up and his hand went to his mouth. Air hissed faintly through the tube in his hand. Without a sound the magter folded and fell to the ground. Before the body hit, Ulf crouched low and rushed in. There was the sudden scuffling of feet on the floor, then silence. Brion walked in, gun ready and alert, not knowing what he would find. His toe pushed against a body on the ground, and from the darkness Ulf whispered, "There were only 2. We can go on now." Finding their way through the cave was maddening torture. They had no light, nor would they dare use one if they had. There were no wheel marks to follow the stone floor. Without Ulf's sensitive nose they would have been completely lost. The cave branched and rejoined, and they soon lost all sense of direction. Walking was almost impossible. They had to grope with their hands before them like blind men. Stumbling and falling against the rock, their fingers were soon throbbing and raw from brushing against rough walls. Ulf followed the scent of the magter that hung in the air where they had passed. When it grew thin, he knew they had left the frequently used tunnels and entered deserted ones. They could only retrace their steps and start again in a different direction. More maddening than the walking was the way time was running out. Inexorably, the glowing hands crept around the face of Brion's watch until they stood at 15 minutes before 12. "There is a light ahead," Ulf whispered, and Brion almost gasped with relief. They moved slowly and silently until they stood, concealed by the darkness, looking out into a domed chamber brightly lit by glowing tubes. "What is it?" Ulf asked, blinking in a painful wash of illumination after the long darkness. Brion had to fight to control his voice, to stop from shouting. "The cage with the metal webbing is a jump space generator. The pointed silver shapes next to us are bombs of some kind, probably the cobalt bombs. We found it." His first impulse was to instantly send the radio call that would stop the waiting fleet of H-bombers. But an unconvincing message would be worse than no message at all. He had to describe exactly what he saw here so the Nyjorders would know he wasn't lying. What he told them had to fit exactly with the information they already had about the launcher and the bombs. The launcher had been jury-rigged from a ship's jump space generator. That was obvious. The generator and its controls were neatly cased and mounted. Cables ran from them to a roughly constructed cage of woven metal straps, hammered and bent into shape by hand. 3 technicians were working on the equipment. Brion wondered what sort of bloodthirsty war lovers the magter had found to handle the bombing for them. Then he saw the chains around their necks and the bloody wounds on their backs. He still found it difficult to have any pity for them. They had obviously been willing to accept money to destroy another planet, or they wouldn't have been working here. They had probably rebelled only when they discovered how suicidal the attack would be. 13 minutes to midnight. Cradling the radio against his chest, Brion rose to his feet. He had a better view of the bombs now. There were 12 of them, alike as eggs from the same deadly clutch, pointed like the bow of a spacer. Each one swept smoothly back for its 2 meters of length to a sharply chopped off end. They were obviously incomplete, the warheads of rockets. One had its base turned towards him, and he saw 6 projecting studs that could be used to attach it to the missing rocket. A circular inspection port was open in the flat base of the bomb. This was enough. With this description, the Nyjorders would know he couldn't be lying about finding the bombs. Once they realized this, they couldn't destroy Dis without first trying to neutralize them. Brion carefully counted 50 paces before he stopped. He was far enough from the cavern so he couldn't be heard, and an angle of the cave cut out all light from behind him. With carefully controlled movements, he turned on the power, switched the set to transmit, and checked the broadcast frequency. All correct. Then, slowly and clearly, he described what he had seen in the cavern behind him. He kept his voice emotionless, recounting facts, leaving out anything that might be considered an opinion. It was 6 minutes before midnight when he finished. He thumbed the switch to receive and waited. There was only silence. Slowly, the empty quality of the silence penetrated his numbed mind. There were no crackling atmospherics nor hiss of static, even when he turned the power full on. The mass of rock and earth of the mountain above was acting as a perfect grounding screen, absorbing his signal even at maximum output. They hadn't heard him. The Nyjord fleet didn't know that the cobalt bombs had been discovered before their launching. The attack would go ahead as planned. Even now the bomb bay doors were opening. Armed H-bombs hung above the planet, held in place only by their shackles. In a few minutes the signal would be given, and the shackles would spring open, the bombs drop clear. "Killers!" Brion shouted into the microphone. "You wouldn't listen to reason, you wouldn't listen to Hise or me or to any voice that suggested an alternative to complete destruction. You're going to destroy Dis, and it's not necessary. There were a lot of ways you could have stopped it. You didn't do any of them, and now it's too late. You'll destroy Dis, and in turn this will destroy Nyjord. Igel said that, and now I believe him. You're just another damned failure in a galaxy full of failures. He raised the radio above his head and sent it crashing into the rock floor. Then he was running back to Ulv, trying to run away from the realization that he too had tried and failed. The people on the surface of Dis had less than 2 minutes left to live. They didn't get my message, Brion said to Ulv. The radio won't work this far underground. Then the bombs will fall? Ulv asked, looking searchingly at Brion's face in the dim reflected light from the cavern. Unless something happens we know nothing about. The bombs will fall. They said nothing after that. They simply waited. The 3 technicians in the cavern were also aware of the time. They were calling to each other and trying to talk to the magter. The emotionless, parasite-ridden brains of the magter saw no reason to stop work, and they attempted to beat the men back to their tasks. In spite of the blows, they didn't go. They only gaped in horror as the clock hands moved remorselessly towards 12. Even the magter dimly felt some of the significance of the occasion. They stopped too and waited. The hour hand touched 12 on Brion's watch, then the minute hand. The second hand closed the gap, and for 1/10 of a second 3 hands were on one. Then the second hand moved on. Brion's immediate sensation of relief was washed away by the chilling realization that he was deep underground. Sound and seismic waves were slow, and the flare of atomic explosions couldn't be seen here. If the bombs had been dropped at 12, they wouldn't know it at once. A distant rumble filled the air. A moment later the ground heaved under them and the lights in the cavern flickered. Fine dust drifted down from the roof above. Ulv turned to him, but Brion looked away. He could not face the accusation in the Disan's eyes. End of chapter 17. Chapter 18 of Planet of the Damned. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Planet of the Damned by Harry Harrison, Chapter 18. One of the technicians was running and screaming. The magter knocked him down and beat him into silence. Seeing this, the other 2 men returned to work with shaking hands. Even if all life on the surface of the planet was dead, this would have no effect on the magter. They would go ahead as planned, without emotion or imagination enough to alter their set course. As the technicians worked, their attitude changed from shocked numbness to anger. Right and wrong were forgotten. They had been killed. The invisible death of radiation must already be penetrating into the caves. But they also had the chance for vengeance. Swiftly they brought their work to completion, with the speed and precision they had concealed before. "What are those off-worlders doing?" Ulv asked. Brion stirred from his lethargy of defeat and looked across the cavern floor. The men had a wheeled hand truck and were rolling one of the atomic warheads onto it. They pushed it over to the lattice work of the jump field. "They're going to bomb Nyjord now, just as Nyjord bombed Dis. That machine will hurl the bombs in a special way to the other planet." "Will you stop them?" Ulv asked. He had his deadly blowgun in his hand, and his face was an expressionless mask. Brion almost smiled at the irony of the situation. In spite of everything he had done to prevent it, Nyjord had dropped the bombs. And this act alone may have destroyed their own planet. Brion had it within his power now to stop the launching in the cavern. Should he? Should he save the lives of his killers? Or should he practice the ancient blood oath that had echoed and destroyed down through the ages? An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. It would be so simple. He literally had to do nothing. The score would be even, and his and the Disan's death avenged. Did Ulv have his blowgun ready to kill Brion with if he should try to stop the launchings? Or had he misread the Disan entirely? "Will you stop them, Ulv?" he asked. How large was mankind's sense of obligation? The caveman first had this feeling for his mate, then for his family. It grew until men fought and died for the abstract ideas of cities and nations, then for whole planets. Would the time ever come when men might realize that the obligation should be to the largest and most encompassing reality of all, mankind, and beyond that to life of all kinds? Brion saw this idea, not in words, but as a reality. When he posed the question to himself in this way, he found that it stated clearly its inherent answer. He pulled his gun out, and as he did, he wondered what Ulv's answer might be. "Nyjord is medvirk," Ulv said, raising his blowgun and sending a dart across the cavern. It struck one of the technicians, who gasped and fell to the floor. Brion's shots crashed into the control board, shorting and destroying it, removing the menace to Nyjord for all time. "Medvirk," Ulv had said, "a life form that cooperates and aids other life forms. It may kill in self-defense, but it is essentially not a killer or destroyer." Ulv had a lifetime of knowledge about the interdependency of life. He grasped the essence of the idea and ignored all the verbal complications and confusions. He had killed the magter, who were his own people, because they were umedvirk, against life, and he had saved his enemies because they were medvirk. With this realization came the painful knowledge that the planet and the people that had produced this understanding were dead. In the cavern, the magter saw the destruction of their plans and the cave mouth from which the bullets had come. Silently they rushed to kill their enemy, a concerted effort of emotionless fury. Brion and Ulv fought back. Even the knowledge that he was doomed no matter what happened could not resign Brion to death at the hands of the magter. To Ulv the decision was much easier. He was simply killing umedvirk, a believer in life. He destroyed the anti-life. They retreated into the darkness, still firing. The magter had lights and ion rifles and were right behind them. Knowing the caverns better than the men they chased, the pursuers circled. Brion saw lights ahead and dragged Ulv to a stop. "They know their way through these caves and we don't," he said. "If we try to run, they'll just shoot us down. Let's find a spot we can defend and settle into it." "Back here," Ulv gave a tug in the right direction. "There is a cave with only one entrance, and that is very narrow. Let's go." Running as silently as they could in the darkness, they reached the deadened cavern without being seen. What noise they made was lost in other footsteps that sounded and echoed through the connecting caves. Once inside, they found cover behind a ridge and waited. The end was certain. The magter ran swiftly into their cave, flashing his light into all the places of concealment. The beam passed over the two hidden men, and at the same instant Brion fired. The shot boomed loudly as the magter fell, a shot that would surely have been heard by others. Before anyone else came into the cave, Brion ran over and grabbed the still functioning light. Propping it on the rock so it shone on the entrance, he hurried back to shelter behind Ulv. They waited for the attack. It was not long in coming. 2 magter rushed in and died. More were outside, Brion knew, and he wondered how long it would be before they remembered the grenades and rolled one into their shelter. An indistinct murmur sounded outside and sharp explosions. In their hiding place, Brion and Ulv crouched low and wondered why the attack didn't come. Then one of the magter came in the entrance, but Brion hesitated before shooting. The man had backed in, firing behind him as he came. Ulv had no compunctions about killing, only his darts couldn't penetrate the magter's thick clothing. As the magter turned, Ulv's breath pulsed once, and death stung the back of the other man's hand. He collapsed into a crumpled heap. "Don't shoot!" a voice called from outside the cave, and a man stepped through the swirling dust and smoke to stand in the beam from the light. Brion clutched wildly at Ulv's arm, dragging the blowgun from the Disan's mouth. The man in the light wore a protective helmet, thick boots, and a pouch-hung uniform. He was a Nyjorder. The realization was almost impossible to accept. Brion had heard the bombs fall. Yet the Nyjord soldier was here. The two facts couldn't be accepted together. "Would you keep a hold on his arm, sir, just in case?" the soldier said, glancing warily at Ulv's blowpipe. I know what those darts can do." He pulled a microphone from one of his pockets and spoke into it. More soldiers crowded into the cave, and Professor Commander Kraft came in behind them. He looked strangely out of keeping in the dusty combat uniform. The gun was even more incongruous in his blue-veined hand. After giving the pistol to the nearest soldier with an air of relief, he stumbled quickly over to Brion and took his hand. "It is a profound and sincere pleasure to meet you in person," he said, "and your friend Ulv as well." "Would you kindly explain what is going on?" Brion said thickly. He was obsessed by the strange feeling that none of this could possibly be happening. "We will always remember you as the man who saved us from ourselves," Kraft said, once again the professor instead of the commander. "What Brion wants are facts, Grandpa, not speeches," High said. The bent form of the leader of the rebel Nyjord army pushed through the crowd of taller men until he stood next to Kraft. "Simply stated, Brion, your plan succeeded. Kraft relayed your message to me, and as soon as I heard it I turned back and met him on his ship. I'm sorry that Telt's death, but he found what we were looking for. I couldn't ignore his report of radioactive traces. Your girlfriend arrived with a hacked up corpse at the same time I did, and we all took a long look at the green leech in its skull. Her explanation of what it is made significant sense. We were already carrying out landings when we had your call about something having been stored in the Magter tower. After that it was just a matter of following tracks and the transmitter you planted." "But the explosions at midnight," Brion broke in. "I heard them." "You were supposed to," Nahis laughed. "Not only you, but the Magter in this cave. We figured they would be armed and the cave strongly defended. So at midnight we dropped a few large chemical explosive bombs at the entrance. Enough to kill the guards without bringing the roof down. We also hoped that the Magter deeper in would leave their posts or retreat from imagined radiation. And they did. It worked like a charm. We came in quietly and took them by surprise, made a clean sweep, killed the ones we couldn't capture." "One of the renegade jump space technicians was still alive," Kraft said. "He told us about your stopping the bombs aimed at Nyjord, the two of you." None of the Nyjorders there could add anything to his words, not even the cynical Highs. But Brion could empathize their feelings, the warmth of their intense relief and happiness. It was a sensation he would never forget. "There is no more war," Brion translated for Ulv, knowing that the Disan had understood nothing of the explanation. As he said it, he realized there was one glaring error in the story. "You couldn't have done it," Brion said. "You landed on this planet before you had my message about the tower. That means you still expected the Magter to be sending their bombs to Nyjord, and you made the landings in spite of this knowledge." "Of course," Professor Kraft said, astonished at Brion's lack of understanding. "What else could we do? The Magter are sick." Highs laughed aloud at Brion's baffled expression. "You have to understand Nyjord's psychology," he said. "When it was a matter of war and killing, my planet could never agree on an intelligent course. War is so alien to our philosophy that it couldn't even be considered correctly. That's the trouble with being a vegetable eater in a galaxy of carnivores. You're easy prey for the first one that lands on your back. Any other planet would have jumped on the Magter with both feet and shaken the bombs out of them. We fumbled it so long it almost got both worlds killed. Your mind parasite drew us back from the brink." "I don't understand," Brion said. "A simple matter of definition. Before you came we had no way to deal with the Magter here on Dis. They really were alien to us. Nothing they did made sense, and nothing we did seemed to have the slightest effect on them. But you discovered that they were sick, and that's something we know how to handle. We're united again. My rebel army was instantly absorbed into the rest of the Nyjord forces by mutual agreement. Doctors and nurses are on the way here now. Plans were put underway to evacuate what part of the population we could until the bombs were found. The planet is united again, and working hard." "Because the Magter are sick, infected by a destructive life form?" Brion asked. "Exactly so," Professor Kraft said. "We are civilized after all. You can't expect us to fight a war, and you surely can't expect us to ignore the plight of sick neighbors." No, you surely can't, Brion said, sitting down heavily. He looked at Ulv, to whom the speech had been incomprehensible. Beyond him, Hys wore his most cynical expression as he considered the frailties of his people. Hys, Brion called out. You translate all that into Disan and explain to Ulv. I wouldn't dare. End of chapter 18.
Chapter 19 of Planet of the Damned. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Planet of the Damned by Harry Harrison. Chapter 19. Dis was a floating golden ball, looking like a schoolroom globe in space. No clouds obscured its surface, and from this distance it seemed warm and attractive set against the cold darkness. Brion almost wished he were back there now, as he sat shivering inside the heavy coat. He wondered how long it would be before his confused body temperature controls decided to turn off the summer adjustment. He hoped it wouldn't be as sudden or as drastic as turning it on had been. Delicate as a dream, Leah's reflection swam in space next to the planet. She had come up quietly behind him in the spaceship's corridor, only her gentle breath and mirrored face telling him she was there. He turned quickly and took her hands in his. "You're looking infinitely better," he said. "Well, I should," she said, pushing back her hair in an unconscious gesture with her hand. "I've been doing nothing but lying in the ship's hospital, while you were having such a fine time this last week. Rushing around down there, shooting all the magter." "Just gassing them," he told her. "The Nyorders can't bring themselves to kill any more, even if it does raise their own casualty rates. In fact, they are having difficulty restraining the Disans led by Ulv, who are happily killing any magter they see as being pure medwerk." "What will they do when they have all those frothing magter madmen?" "They don't know yet," he said. "They won't really know until they see what an adult magter is like with his brain parasite dead and gone. They're having better luck with the children. If they can catch them early enough, the parasite can be destroyed before it has done too much damage." Leah shuddered delicately and let herself lean against him. "I'm not that sturdy yet. Let's sit down while we talk." There was a couch opposite the viewport where they could sit and still see Dis. "I hate to think of a magter deprived of his symbiote," she said. "If his system can stand the shock, I imagine there will be nothing left except a brainless hulk. This is one series of experiments I don't care to witness. I rest secure in the knowledge that the Nyorders will find the most humane solution." "I'm sure they will," Brion said. "Now, what about us?" she said disconcertingly, leaning back in his arms. "I must say you have the highest body temperature of anyone I have ever touched. It's positively exciting." This jarred Brion even more. He didn't have her ability to put past horrors out of the mind by substituting present pleasures. "Well, just what about us?" he said, with masterful inappropriateness. She smiled as she leaned against him. "You weren't as vague as that the night in the hospital room. I seem to remember a few other things you said and did. You can't claim you're completely indifferent to me, Brion Brandd, so I'm only asking you what any outspoken Anvharian girl would. Where do we go from here? Get married?" There was a definite pleasure in holding her slight body in his arms and feeling her hair against his cheek. They both sensed it, and this awareness made his words sound that much more ugly. "Leah, darling, you know how important you are to me. But you certainly realize that we could never get married." Her body stiffened and she tore herself away from him. "Why, you great, fat, egotistical slab of meat! What do you mean by that? I like you, Leah. We have plenty of fun and games together, but surely you realize that you aren't the kind of girl that one takes home to mother."
"Leah, hold on," he said. "You know better than to say a thing like that. What I said has nothing to do with how I feel towards you. But marriage means children, and you are a biologist enough to know about Earth's genes."
"Intolerant yokel!" she cried, slapping his face. He didn't move or attempt to stop her. "I expected better from you, with all your pretensions of understanding." But all you can think of are the horror stories about worn-out genes of Earth. You're the same as every other big, strapping bigot from the frontier planets. I know how you look down on our small size, our allergies, our hemophilia, and all the other weaknesses that have been bred back and preserved by the race. You hate—" "But that's not what I meant at all," he interrupted, shocked, his voice drowning hers out. "Yours are the strong genes, the viable strains. Mine are the deadly ones. A child of mine would kill itself and you in a natural birth, if it managed to live to term. You're forgetting that you are the original Homo sapiens. I'm a recent mutation." Leah was frozen by his words. They revealed the truth she had known but would never permit herself to consider. "Earth is home, the planet where mankind developed," he said. "The last few thousand years you may have been breeding weaknesses back into the genetic pool, but that's nothing compared to the hundreds of millions of years that it took to develop man. How many newborn babies live to be a year of age on Earth?" "Why, almost all of them. A fraction of 1% die each year. I can't recall how many." "Earth is home," he said again gently. "When men leave home they can adapt to different planets, but a price must be paid. A terrible price is in dead infants. The successful mutations live, the failures die. Natural selection is a brutally simple affair. When you look at me you see a success. I have a sister, a success too. Yet my mother had 6 other children who died when they were still babies, and several others that never came to term. You know about these things, don't you, Leah?" I know," she said, sobbing into her hands. He held her now, and she didn't pull away. "I know it all as a biologist, but I am so awfully tired of being a biologist, and the top of my class and a mental match for any man. When I think about you, I do it as a woman, and can't admit any of this. I need someone, Brion, and I needed you so much because I loved you." She paused and wiped her eyes. "You're going home, aren't you? Back to Anvhar? When?" "I can't wait too long," he said unhappily. "Aside from my personal wants, I find myself remembering that I'm a part of Anvhar. When you think of the number of people who suffered and died, or adapted, so that I could be sitting here now, well, it's a little frightening. I suppose it doesn't make sense logically that I should feel indebted to them, but I do. Anything I do now, or in the next few years, won't be as important as getting back to Anvhar. And I won't be going back with you." It was a flat statement, the way she said it, not a question. "No, you won't be," he said. "There is nothing on Anvhar for you." Leah was looking out the port at Dis, and her eyes were dry now. "Way back in my deeply buried unconscious I think I knew it would end this way," she said. "If you think your little lecture on the origins of man was a novelty, it wasn't. It just reminded me of a number of things my glands had convinced me to forget. In a way, I envy you, your weightlifter wife-to-be and your happy kiddies, but not very much. Very early in life I resigned myself to the fact that there was no one on Earth I would care to marry. I always had these teenage dreams of a hero from space who would carry me off, and I guess I slipped you into that pattern without realizing it. I'm old enough now to face the fact that I like my work more than a banal marriage, and I'll probably end up a frigid and virtuous old maid, with more degrees and titles than you have shot-putting records." As they looked through the port, Dis began slowly to contract. Their ship drew away from it, heading towards Nyord. They sat apart, without touching now. Leaving Dis meant leaving behind something they had shared. They had been strangers together there, on a strange world. For a brief time their lifelines had touched. That time was over now. "Don't we look happy?" Hys said, shambling towards them. "Fall dead and make me even happier then," Leah snapped bitterly. Hys ignored the acid tone of her words and sat down on the couch next to them. Since leaving the command of his rebel Nyord army, he seemed much mellower. "Going to keep on working for the Cultural Relationships Foundation, Brion?" he asked. "You're the kind of man we need." Brion's eyes widened as the meaning of the last words penetrated. "Are you in the CRF?" "Field agent for Nyord," he said. "I hope you don't think those helpless office types like Fossil or Merv really represented us there. They just took notes and acted as a front and cover for the organization. Nyord is a fine planet, but a gentle guiding hand behind the scenes is needed, to help them find their place in the galaxy before they are pulverized. "What's your dirty game, Hiss?" Leah asked, scowling. "I've had enough hints to suspect for a long time that there was more to the CRF than the sweetness and light part I have seen. Are you people egomaniacs, power hungry, or what?" "That's the first charge that would be leveled at us if our activities were publicly known," Hiss told her. "That's why we do most of our work undercover. The best fact I can give you to counter the charge is money. Just where do you think we get the funds for an operation this size?" He smiled at their blank looks. "You'll see the records later, so there won't be any doubt. The truth is that all our funds are donated by planets we have helped. Even a tiny percentage of a planetary income is large. Add enough of them together and you have enough money to help out other planets. And voluntary gratitude is a perfect test if you stop to think about it. You can't talk people into liking what you have done. They have to be convinced. There have always been people on CRF worlds who knew about our work and agreed with it enough to see that we are kept in funds." "Why is it you are telling me all this super secret stuff?" Leah asked. "Isn't it obvious? We want you to keep on working for us. You can name whatever salary you like. As I said, there is no shortage of cash." Hiss glanced quickly at them both and delivered the clinching argument. "I hope Brion will go on working with us too. He is the kind of field agent we desperately need, and it is almost impossible to find." "Just show me where to sign," Leah said, and there was life in her voice once again. "I wouldn't exactly call it blackmail," Brion smiled. "But I suppose if you people can juggle planetary psychologies, you must find that individuals can be pushed around like chessmen. Though you should realize that very little pushing is required this time." "Will you sign on?" Hiss asked. "I must go back to Anvhar," Brion said. "But there really is no pressing hurry." "Earth," said Leah, "is overpopulated enough as it is." End of chapter 19. End of Planet of the Damned.